Another thought is about celebration. So this is another thing that occurred to me last night, because I've been wanting to rekindle my energy around all of my expressions, whether it be my newsletter, how I share my art, what I offer. Um, and I have a lot of offerings inside me that have taken forms, different forms, but I haven't had my full energy behind it. And I've been wanting to find more energy to be able to put into those forms that are more accessible and available to people. Um, and the thing that came to me last night after actually working on this book and finding the delight again was a reason to share. And this is sort of like my inside voice that I'll say out loud. I can get behind the reason for sharing as celebrating. And something I read this morning about pride, and this is Pride Month, so it was in that context, but that pride and grief go together. And I really could identify with that. Like, in order to step into our pride and ownership of who we really are, despite everything that means and is at stake for other people, when we step into that, there's always grief. There's always the letting go of our expectations that were placed on us, the fear that was projected onto us, and our attachment to what other people think of us. That's a tremendous grief process. And so pride and grief are together. I love that. I can really, really feel that. And somehow the celebration and pride and grief sort of inspired me to remember that for me, when I can celebrate myself as I am, step into my pride, the reason to do that, other than inside my own vessel, in my own practice, silently expressing to myself, the reason to express it outward is to let myself be loved as I am. And love is not a state of taking care of other people and making them comfortable. That's not actually love, even though that's what many of us were taught and conditioned very deeply as children and into adult children to register that being loved means everyone else around you is okay. No. Allowing myself to be loved as I am means I let people see me and make a decision and come closer to me or not, to set their own boundary. So I actually love them and then allow them to choose love, and I get to choose their love also. But this act of celebrating myself as I am is important to even make that receiving possible. And so that's my new energy behind why I would share anything. And I looked up the definition of celebrate last night, and I love the definition because it includes the word acknowledgement, it includes event, it includes joy, and it includes honoring. So when I celebrate myself and I celebrate these moments, what I'm choosing to celebrate in my sharing is I'm celebrating moments of discovery and joy in my practice of creative living, which is a new practice for me that I consciously entered into 12 years ago. And it's always discovery. But when I put the word celebrate next to it, it has this quality of honoring and acknowledgement, and it has this quality of sharing joy. And I'm going to include that there are discoveries, deep discoveries from the grief, from the acknowledgement of previously unacknowledged abuse and neglect, that are ultimately very joyful discoveries even if the emotions are not all joy, the fact of discovery is incredibly worth celebrating for me. And so all of it, and these moments of delight, and I'm sharing a book in progress. I'm deciding whether I'm going to tag that video, edit it onto this video, or have it separate for those of my viewers that just want to see flipping of pages and don't want to see my face and hear me speak, which I'm imagining there's some people. But to show something in progress, because I think I was withholding celebration until something was complete. And so the difference is I'm celebrating the interim. I'm celebrating the moments of discovery that happen along the way before I even know what it's going to be. And how potent is that to apply to ourselves? How potent is that practice to celebrate ourselves where we are, no matter what it is now, and knowing, in the case of my book, I know it's going to change many times between now and when I decide it's done. And it totally applies to me in my life too, as a person. So why not celebrate me now as I am, with pride and grief, and know that everything about me will change eventually until I'm no longer in this physical form and I exist only as perhaps the celebrations that I left behind. So maybe this comes from, I don't know where it comes from. It came from my book practice last night. I'm not going to go any further into it than that. But the last thing I want to say is 11 years ago, it was between 2010 and 2011, I wrote, this is before self-care was a thing. There was no self-care. Self-care was a brand new term. When I came across it in an obscure online class, I was like, oh my gosh, what is that? And I dove into it, and I created my own online course. Before online courses were a thing, when the platform I used was a startup company, which is now one of the top teaching online platforms. I made an online course on self-care, kind of just very innocently. And all I want to say is the first principle of my self-care was boundaries. And today, 12 years later, 11 years later, it continues to be such a huge, deep well of discovery. What that means to apply it in all different areas and to put it into practice in relationships that are alive here and now and dynamic, and how those lack of boundaries has hurt me, and how I'm just completely blind to it in many areas. But it's something I'm practicing with. And my current thinking on that, because I've been working with rage too, like the sources of my rage. And I realized that the opposite of self-care, because self-care now is like about getting massage and a manicure and candles, which is, I don't even know how that came to be. It's totally foreign to me. Because when I first encountered the word and started using self-care, it was about a way of regarding yourself. Literally a gaze, a set of eyes that is turned toward yourself that may have never actually turned toward yourself ever in your life. So it's how do you behold, appreciate, and acknowledge who you are? How do you find out what that is? And it really has nothing to do with candles. But the opposite of self-care to me is self-betrayal. And I realize that the roots of my rage are in self-betrayal. The millions of moments that I betrayed myself. I lied to myself. I denied myself. I pushed myself aside, tossed myself away, shoved myself around in the name of another list of a million things. But mostly it was, I thought I was taking care, thought I was getting love, but I was really taking care of someone else's discomfort and actually managing my self-image in their eyes, not looking at myself at all through my own eyes, but actually always seeing through someone else's eyes and meeting those expectations and morphing myself to be what I needed to be to get the look of approval from them. And the rage comes from the moments when you realize that that pursuit is futile because it's conditional, and the moment your behavior no longer takes care of that person's discomfort, you will fall out of favor, be rejected, and be the object of whatever their defense mechanism is for pushing away discomfort, which will probably mean some sort of personal attack or rejection of you or judgment of you that has nothing to do with you, but since you're playing the role of being the image that they want to be of you, it's shocking. And then you realize you've betrayed yourself. And then you have the rage that first is definitely directed at that person. But then when you go deeper and sit longer with it and come back to yourself, you see that that rage is actually directed at the part of yourself that betrayed you. That's a lot to take in. It came to me all at once today in words, but I've been sitting with this for years and more deeply for the past several months with a lot of different unfolding twists and turns in my own internal narratives about what has been true for me in my own narrative of family dynamics, etc. So self-care and self-betrayal are opposites. And so self-care is coming out of self-betrayal. Self-care is any act where we come out of any act of self-betrayal. And believe me, there are millions every single day. So any micro turn we can make away from those is an act of self-care. So let's be very generous with our definition of that. For me, it was literally making a video of something in progress instead of waiting till it was done to be okay with videotaping it. And then it sort of led to this cascade of insights. So that's my practice. And we'll see what else I end up saying on this channel. But thanks, James, for the comment. Saying that you missed my insights. And if there's anyone else who actually wants to hear me say more, let me know. But I probably won't base my decision to speak on whether or not you want to hear me. I will simply be following the celebration of what brings me delight and joy and discovery and sharing that.